Well, hello, everyone. This is Betty Meredith, President of the International Retirement Resource Center, and I'm happy to be your session host today for how to protect an aging client's or adult child's retirement security from a medical crisis with Annalee Kruger of CareRight, Inc. Retirement health care is a wild card expense that can destroy even the best laid plans. In addition, most parents want to age in place, so a medical crisis can put families into a tailspin if a plan is not in place ahead of time. Adult children who assume the role of caregiver must reorganize their business and personal lives to meet the needs of an aging loved one, as well as find funds to meet the unexpected health costs. It is important for advisors to understand the needs typically associated with the medical event of an aging loved one and how it might affect the retirement security of the aging client and their adult caregivers, and as well to understand what can be done to help clients be financially and legally prepared. Annalee Kruger's mission is to help families be proactive and put plans in place before a medical crisis occurs. While she serves families in Southwest Florida, she also serves families across the United States. Because gone are the days of families living in the same zip code, let alone the same time zone. So she guides families through virtual meetings and family coaching and education. In 2011, she founded CareRight, Inc. to help families with aging loved ones navigate through the long-term care industry and cope with the issues that family caregivers encounter. She has worked with thousands of facility residents, their families, and caregivers, as well as numerous healthcare agencies, and delivered hundreds of trainings and in-service trainings to professionals and family caregivers on a variety of topics. Annalee has also provided business training for organizations across the United States and China, and has worked at every level of the long-term care industry, starting 25 years ago as a social worker and eventually directing all operations of a community-based continuing care retirement facility. She has her MBA and has certificates in Six Sigma Black Belt, family mediation, PSTD, grief, trauma, and loss counseling. She's also a member of the National Speakers Association, the National Association of Social Workers, and the Financial Planners Association in Wisconsin and in Florida. So Annalee and I had talked about this topic is highly relevant for me right now because my husband and his 4 siblings are juggling taking care of his dad, who is now 94. So very timely for me, Annalee, and welcome, and thank you for being here with us today. And now I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Betty. I appreciate being here. I just would like to go ahead and start. I appreciate the bio that you presented. Today we're going to talk about how to protect an aging client's or adult child's retirement security from a medical crisis. What we're going to learn today is how advisors can and should help their aging clients and their clients' adult children prepare for a health event ahead of time, a portrait of a family caregiver to aging loved ones, and what can happen to their retirement security if their needs are not addressed. We're also going to learn about the consequence of advisors not having relationships with the adult children of aging clients, and then also why it's important to develop a team of professionals to refer your clients to. What we do. I used to be a social worker and long-term care administrator for over 20 years, and every day I had families in my office because there was a medical crisis. Mom fell, she broke her hip, hospital says, here's a list of facilities, go find one because we're discharging today at noon. And the families are just completely caught off guard. They never thought about what is our actual plan if something happens to mom or dad. Who in the family is able to drop what they're doing, leave work for a couple of weeks and sort out what their options might be. And so rather than always being in crisis reaction mode, I started my company, CareRight Incorporated, to really help families with a mission of helping families be proactive and sitting down and talking about our aging plan sooner rather than later. Ideally, when things are still going well, because I've never had a family ever come back to me and say, gosh, Annalee, I feel really great and really confident about the decisions that we had to make when emotions were high and time is limited. So it's really about proactive planning. Just like you all plan from a financial perspective, you help your clients plan ahead from a financial perspective. I help families plan ahead from an aging perspective. Where is my loved one going to live? How is care going to get paid? And who's going to provide that care? So one of the main advantages of having a neutral third-party person facilitate these family conversations is because these are really sensitive conversations to have. When we're talking about incontinence or memory issues or, family dynamics and family dysfunction, they really need a trained, neutral third-party person to really navigate these kind of conversations. Most of the families, when they call me, are already so strained with their relationships with their siblings and with their parents. We'll talk a little bit later about what the reality is of being a family caregiver, how it starts out kind of slow. Yeah, we can come over on Saturday and help you with laundry and dishes, and the next thing you know, that they're taking off work and having to go with them to doctor's appointments and so forth. And when we talk about strained relationships, it's because, well, usually all of this caregiving falls on the shoulders of one person, and so their relationships with their siblings get pretty strained. We also, when we're meeting with our clients, explore what are their goals and what are their resources. If they don't have a lot of resources, then that's going to limit what their goals really can be from a feasible perspective. We also assess their mood, behavior, their day-to-day living, their memory issues, if they have any fall history. And then ADLs is activities of daily living. So the things that you and I can do routinely without even having to think about and strategize and plan for. Elderly people and adults with disabilities, to even get out of bed to get to the bathroom is all about strategy. How can I get out of bed to the bathroom with the least amount of pain, with the least amount of shortness of breath, with the least amount of risk for falls? So it's really a very detailed, down and comprehensive assessment of what is it they can do for themselves and what do they need help with. And then when we get done, we talk about what is the aging plan? Where is the loved one going to live? Who will provide that care, and how will care get paid? Most of my families that call me are the adult daughter who's the primary caregiver. She's also taking care of up to 6 other aging parents or 6 other aging loved ones, whether it's her parents and step-parents and then her in-laws, which she may or may not like, and then that stray aunt or uncle who outlived their children or never got married. So we'll talk a little bit later about what is the time commitment for just one person, let alone these people that are taking care of multiple aging loved ones and trying to manage their own households as well. Then we also, when we're meeting with our families or our clients, we also ask them to bring whatever documents in that they feel like they have in order, like the living will, the power of attorney documents, if they have long-term care insurance, all of that kind of stuff, just to dust it off, because oftentimes, 9 times out of 10, they have still listed a healthcare agent who now may have moderate to severe dementia and is not able to make any decisions for themselves, let alone someone else, or the spouse that passed away 6 years ago, and just with all the busyness of the funeral and then life, they forget to update the power of attorney documents. The other reality is that a lot of these elderly people have long-term care insurance, and the adult children don't know, and because they don't communicate, they don't talk about these things. And so oftentimes when I'm working with a new family and I have them bring their documents, mom or dad will bring the the copy of the long-term care insurance, and the kids are like, well, we didn't even know you had that. So, I mean, that alone is a huge cost savings. Otherwise, these adult children are trying to fund the care for their parents, and they're like, no, we did plan for that. And then there's the other category of folks that didn't do any kind of planning whatsoever. So we just really have those kind of conversations. And then the grab-and-go binder is important, because the other thing I know from working in long-term care is when that medical event happens, nobody has these documents at their fingertips. And so, especially in this day and age where people just don't live in the same zip code anymore, and then they have to catch a plane to fly to wherever their parent lives, and they're like, oh, we have no idea where the living will is or the power of attorney. And so I help my clients. I have a package offering for the grab and go binder, so that it's got all their information in it, their accounts, their passwords, who's their financial planner, so it's a very good conversation starter to help these families have conversation and communicate about what they have in place and what more do they need to put into place. So why do we do what we do? Because medical crises happen every single day. No one ever expects or plans to have a stroke. No one expects to fall and hit their head and have a subdural hematoma that's going to be life-changing. No one ever plans for these things, but yet they happen every single day. And I don't know about you, but there's some things that it's okay to be willy-nilly about, like down here in Florida, trying to go out for dinner during season without a reservation. But there's no harm, no foul, because there's always Subway or McDonald's. But you don't want to be willy-nilly about your care and your aging process. And when you're the most vulnerable and the most dependent, you really need to make sure that you have a plan. Otherwise, you're going to likely get sub-quality care by sub-quality care providers. What's the other advantage of proactive planning? Because when you get older, your conditions change very quickly. If any of you have aging parents or grandparents, you know that one trip and fall can be a disaster for them. One urinary tract infection, a common cold, any of those things can really trigger a lot of other health issues and financial issues for the family and their loved one. Hospitals, speedy discharges. Like I said, when you go to the hospital, their goal is to get you out ASAP, and it's no different with elderly people. So sometimes I need to talk to the doctors and the decision makers about, this is Ethel. She's 92 years old. She doesn't have any kind of plan in place to return home safely. And if you discharge her now at 9 o'clock at night, because that's what they do, she's going to be unsuccessful and she'll be back in the hospital. But that's what their role is once you're in, to get you back out. Many facilities, as far as assisted livings, memory care units, nursing homes, have long waiting lists, and you also have to financially qualify. And a lot of people don't know that. And so they're waiting until the last minute, and then they're like, oh my gosh, we can't even get into these 3 places because we don't have enough money, or there's a waiting list. And so these are really important things to address with clients, because people don't know what they don't know, and so then they make really expensive decisions and mistakes, and you have to undo that. So planning ahead for where are they going to get their care, and making sure that they qualify for places to be able to move into. And also just the common sense, families and loved ones need to have peace of mind. I can tell you that my families, before Care Right was in place to help them with their aging plan, they said that they just cringed every time that phone rang, because they didn't know if it's rarely ever good news when their phone would ring, because that meant that dad fell again, or mom has dementia and she wandered out of the house. So they always are just walking on eggshells when that phone rings. And then the significant cost savings if you plan ahead. In 2015, there was a study that outlined that caregivers estimate that proper planning would have resulted in basically saving them about $8,000 in out-of-pocket expenses. And that's from Genworth in 2015. So I've been very curious about what is the actual out-of-pocket cost for my families. And so last year I had my clients, my primary caregivers, who were the ones that were kind of the go-to person for the family, kind of calculate how much money they spent out of pocket for their aging parents' needs, just in travel expense. And when you get that phone call that says that, dad has Parkinson's and he fell again, my daughters and sons were spending an average of $18,000 out of pocket when they had more than one person that they were tending to that's elderly. Because again, if you have to fly to wherever that loved one is, when you get that crisis call, airfare is not $200. And then you have to rent cars, rent hotel. It's very expensive. And when you have more than one person you're taking care of, it's a lot of out of pocket, because again, families don't have a plan in place. And when you think about all that out of pocket, that's just in travel expense. That's not counting time away from work. So they're losing revenue or income. If they're an employee, they're losing income. And if they're like a business owner like me, they're losing out on revenue because they have to tend to the needs of their parents. So a lot of my clients are business owners. They are very busy. They're realtors. They can't make money if they're not in their area to make money. If they're in Colorado instead of down here in Florida, trying to sell houses. You can't do that when you're in Colorado. So what is a family caregiver? A family caregiver is a spouse, adult, child, or other relative, partner, or friend who has a personal relationship with and provides a broad range of unpaid assistance for an older adult with chronic or a disabling condition. So dementia, aging, MS, ALS, any of those kind of chronic conditions. And what's key there is it's unpaid. So again, these caregivers are taking time out of their jobs and time away from their family, and some of them are quitting work or taking early retirement so that they can have the flexibility in their schedule to take care of their aging parent. So that's why it's a crisis out there with these families really financially jeopardizing themselves so that they can be available and provide the hands-on care and supervision that their loved ones need. So when we talk about who is the typical caregiver, it's usually the female. So it's usually a wife, a daughter, or daughter-in-law. And 52% of these caregivers are the adult children of the recipient. So it's the adult children of their parents that are taking care of them. 60% of the caregivers are between the age of 25 and 54. And the average caregiver age decreased from age 53 in 2010 to age 46 in 2015. So people are living longer, and the other change too is that people are getting married later, or they're at least starting to have children later in life. And so if you're in your 40s and you just started your family, like I'm 46, so if I had little kids, and then my parents are 78 and 80, and my mom has Alzheimer's disease, and my dad is her caregiver. So when you think about the typical family caregiver is someone that's my age, who's trying to manage their own family, their career, their business, and then also be available for their aging parents. It's an epidemic out there. Over 2/3 of caregivers sustained their commitment for more than 1 year, and a third of them for over 5 years. And that's just for one person. So a lot of my families that I talk to, they'll say, you know what, I just took care of my husband he had MS or ALS, and he died, and I had to take care of him for 5 years, and now I'm taking care of mom. And they're already burned out from the first, round, if you will, of being a caregiver. And now they're in the throes of having to be a caregiver again. And we'll talk about how exhausting that is, the role and the toll of being a family caregiver. So when you think about the financial toll of being a caregiver, caregivers miss an average of 7 hours per week of work. So that's 18% of a 40-hour work week. When you look at 33% of the average income is lost by caregivers each year because of their duties of being a caregiver. And then when you think about how times have changed, in 2010, 64% of caregivers missed work due to caregiving. And in 2015, 77% of caregivers missed work due to caregiving. And one of the changes, and this isn't in the presentation, but one of the changes that happened is when the economy was much better, some of these larger companies provided like adult daycare, and they provided some geriatric counseling for their employees. But when the economy tanked, that was one of the benefits that they took away. And the unfortunate thing is that they shouldn't have, because we have an aging population out there, and a lot of these caregivers are in the workforce, and they're jeopardizing their financial future, which should be a concern for you as their financial advisor. So often caregiving leads to retiring early. They decline their job promotions. They take menial positions because they need the flexibility in their schedule. And they're also quitting their jobs to move closer to their aging parent. This is something that I hear every single day from my families that I meet with. I just met with another family yesterday. A son in Ohio, the other brother lives in New Jersey. Mom and dad live in Indiana and split their time in Arizona, and dad has dementia. And so they're trying to figure out as a family, okay, well, does it make sense to have mom and dad keep going to Arizona? Where are they going to live? Who's going to take care of them? And how is that going to impact us? And the one son, who's the business owner, said, I stopped working 2 days a week from my business because my parents have all these doctor's appointments and they have all this stuff that they need help with. And he goes, I'm in uncharted territory here. I have no idea what I'm doing. And I'm trying to help my mom in the bathroom and showering her. And it's just, this is a typical day for me. So these are clients that you have that are going through this, and it's a huge dilemma. And caregivers fund their aging parents because they don't know if their parents already have long-term care insurance, or everybody seems to think that Medicare is one of the retirement buckets that they can count on, and they are sadly misinformed because Medicare does not pay for things that everybody seems to think that it will. So in 2010, only 41% of the caregivers were funding their aging parents, and in 2015, 62% of their parents were being funded by their adult children. So that should be a concern as from a financial perspective on, oh my goodness, my clients are not making as much money because they are already missing work to tend to their aging loved one, and they're self-funding. They're funding their aging parent. I have a gentleman in Fort Myers. He's a grandson, but he was raised by his grandmother. So she's in an assisted living facility. He's in his 30s. He's married with two little kids. And so the grandmother doesn't have money. So he's working a second job, nights and weekends. And that's how he's paying for his grandmother's assisted living. And so I said, because obviously to me as a social worker, there's a lot of problems with that. Number one, how's your marriage affected? How are you feeling with your level of engagement and involvement with your own children, and how sustainable is this? So, those are typical issues that I'm dealing with every single day. And that's just from a financial perspective. When you look at the health perspective of being a family caregiver, 54% of caregivers experience negative feelings, including guilt and resentment. Because in the beginning, it starts out, just like I said earlier, it starts out kind of slow. Yeah, I can help you with your mail. I can bring over some milk. I can do this or I can do that. And the next thing you know, they're taking time off work and they're not taking their vacations, and oftentimes they've already exhausted their FMLA benefit. They have no vacation days left because they've had to take their parents to the doctor's office. And a long time ago, businesses and corporate America was much more family friendly. And nowadays, if you're in sales and you're not hitting your sales targets, you're fired. So there's a lot of pressure for these families, and then they feel really guilty for feeling angry, but they're like, this is not what I signed up for. There's got to be a better way. And there is. You have to have a plan. 43% of caregivers said a long-term care event negatively affected their personal health and well-being. And why is that? Because when that broken hip happens, or dad is the primary caregiver to the mom with dementia and dad dies because he's burned out, these adult children have to jump in and figure out a solution on how is this going to affect our family and what can we do? And it affects their well-being. People with Alzheimer's disease require an average of 70 hours per week of supervision and care. 62% of those hours are usually provided by a family caregiver. So again, you're looking at your clients who are family caregivers missing out on a lot of work and burning through a lot of energy and time that they could use on their own families. Approximately 80% of dementia patients are cared for at home by their family members, and most caregivers report feelings of anxiety and depression. Almost probably 4 times a week, I'll get calls from adult children and say, I'm on medications for anxiety, depression, I'm not sleeping at night, my family doesn't even want to hang out with me anymore because I'm just moody all the time. And that is so frequent. And I also do a caregiver burnout assessment with those caregivers, and they almost all score in the moderate to severe range of burnout because it's affecting their finances, caregiving is affecting their health, their socialization, their emotional and physical well-being. And then you end up with compassion fatigue. And the reason why is because they're burned out, because there's not enough supports in place, and there's not a plan put together. So of course you're going to burn out. And as we talked about earlier, the strained relationships with the siblings, because most of this falls on the shoulders of one person, and it's usually the local person. And the other siblings are not kicking in or pitching in or stepping up. And so one of the things I do sometimes first is I have to do a family mediation, because you would hope the aging process brings families together, but it really can fracture strained relationships and just make those relationships worse. The responsibility, again, like I said earlier, falls on the local child or whoever lives the closest to their aging parents. By 2030, approximately 20% of the United States will be over the age of 65, and so we need more professional and family caregivers, but the reality is families are much, much smaller than they used to be. And so we already have a lack of family caregivers, and we also have a lack of, therefore, professional caregivers. And the reality is that not everybody is meant or cut out to be a caregiver. You have to have a specialness about you to be able to take care of aging people, and not everybody has that, so there's a shortage of it. Care recipients are getting younger. There's a longer need for care, so people are getting unhealthy younger. I've got people that had to retire at age 50 because they had that unexpected stroke and weren't able to get back to work. And so when you're 50 or 60 years old, then you've got that much longer that you're going to receive care for. In 2015, about 60% of care recipients were over the age of 65. And there's about 70% of people are turning 65 can expect to need some form of long-term care during their remaining lives. So that's why it's so important to have these conversations. I don't care if you're 80 years old or if you're 50 years old or 30 years old. These are conversations that families have to have because you never know what's in store for you every day. Why does all of this matter? Because there's a family caregiving crisis epidemic out there. We all have heard about the opiate epidemic, and there is for sure that. There's no question about that. But I am telling you, with almost a 30-year career, there's a family caregiving crisis out there that no one is talking about, and it's a shame because everyone, all of you, know someone who's aging, probably have aging parents yourself. You know someone who's going through some sort of health issue, a surgery, a new diagnosis. You know someone who's got a chronic illness. You know someone who's going through some sort of health and life transition in some way. And you know families that are caregivers. And we've got to reach all of those people and say, look, let's sit down and have a plan put together now while things are still going relatively well, because that aging process is bumpy. And it's not even just the aging process, is if you have MS or ALS or any of those kind of chronic conditions that strike younger, that's bumpy. That's very bumpy because those are all progressive diseases, and you've got to have a plan in place if you want to reserve or preserve their assets as long as possible. The aging process rarely brings families closer together. One of the things is that when I meet with families, I meet with a whole family. And so my client is a whole family. And so some of the kids will say, you know, we never got along since Tom said something stupid at Thanksgiving 20 years ago. And now we've got an aging parent and we're all supposed to work together as a team. And I said, exactly. So let's work through that and get in a better position here. Family caregivers are in survival mode. They're trying to make it through their day, but it's at the expense of their own well-being. I just wrote a book about the portrait of a family caregiver. It's the invisible patient, because everyone always asks, well, how's your dad doing? Well, dad's doing fine, but it's because I'm missing work. It's because I'm missing time away from my family. It's because I am his assisted living. And so they're just in survival mode, trying to balance their work, their own family, their career, and not feel guilty about not being available as much as their parents might need. Families all across the United States struggle with how to best care for their aging loved ones, whether they live local or far away. And that's why I work with families all across the United States, because families are everywhere. I only have 4 or 5 families right now where they all live actually in the same zip code. Otherwise, they all live scattered across the United States. And our case study will talk more here in the next couple slides about what's one kind of typical client for me. You have the ability, though, as their financial advisors and as to be a resource for your clients. And so you're on the right webinar to learn about the aging process, to learn about family caregiving, and how you can become, if you're not already, how you can become a better resource for your clients. So Ethel and Marvin are 2 names that I always use them. Their daughter is Sally, and Sally's brother is John. So that's kind of always my kind of framework family. So we've got Ethel and Marvin. It's their second marriage. They both have 3 children, and all 3 kids, so 6 kids, live in 6 different states. Ethel has memory impairment. Marvin is her primary caregiver. When you think about what issues can you predict? So it's a second marriage, 6 children, live in 6 different states. So one thing you may think about is, boy, I wonder how well those kids and stepkids all get along. So what's the relationship with the children, with the adult children? What's the relationship with their children and their respective parent? What's the relationship with the children and their respective step parent? We know that memory impairment we know dementia is a progressive disease, and we know that Ethel will need more and more care and oversight as her disease progresses. We know that Marvin is her primary caregiver, who's also up in years, and most likely will be having his own physical health issues, but yet he's also needing to tend to Ethel, because at some point Ethel won't be able to stay home by herself, and at some point Ethel will need supervision 24 hours a day. She'll need help with bathing, dressing, grooming, giving her medication. So that's what the typical picture will look like if you've got clients with memory impairment. So when you think about what are those issues, what does the family relationship all across the board look like? We know that both parents are going to have diseases that are progressive. Ethel's not going to get better from a memory perspective, and her health isn't always going to stay good either. And so when you've got kids living all across the globe, basically, it's a smart idea to have these conversations, because what I see is, well, Ethel's kids will say, well, we don't want our mom taking care of dad, and dad's kids will say, well, we don't want our dad taking care of, mom with, this lady with dementia, and we want our mom to live closer to us, and that might involve separating the two. And does that make sense? And how is that going to unfold? And who's going to have that conversation? And is there a better way? So these are typical cases. They're not easy slam dunks. When you're dealing with second marriages or second relationships or families that don't get along and then they live remotely from each other, it's critical that they have these conversations as a family and a plan put together by a neutral third-party person. Do you think it would be wise to understand the liability issues involving the memory impairment from your perspective, from being an advisor? And so we'll talk a little bit about some memory issues there too, but I was talking to a financial advisor in Wisconsin yesterday, and she had just come from a workshop that families are starting to sue advisors because they're like, well, of course mom has memory impairment. How can you not know that? And so as an advisor, it is essential that you learn about memory impairment and what are the red flags and how does that affect you and your business and your livelihood and those assets under management. Because the other reason is, what do you think will happen to the assets under management when either Ethel or Marvin dies? So having these conversations, or at least broaching some conversations, getting a relationship with these adult children is going to be critical if you want to stay in business. Because I'm sure most of you can put it together that when your elderly clients die, if those adult children don't know you, here you've done such a great job of developing those assets under management, only to have the adult children swoop in after the death occurs and move those assets to an advisor that they know. So if that makes sense to you, that's why I had that kind of pregnant pause there. Because if you're kind of new to dealing with an aging population, they will die, and those adult children will swoop in and move those assets under management to an advisor they know. So if you're more of a transactional advisor, I would strongly encourage you to become more relational with your clients, or you'll lose out on your assets under management. Final thoughts and takeaways: the opportunity cost of not addressing aging and family caregiving issues with your clients. Poor planning or no planning results in increased care costs, hence lower assets under management. And so, you've got to have those assets to manage. So we've got to try to preserve those as long as possible. And to do that, it's important to put that plan together. One of the things that I have learned with working with advisors these last few years is that most advisors that I've met anyway, through sponsoring FPAs and speaking at the retreat and speaking at all of these workshops is advisors really don't understand the aging process. And why would you? Because unless you've worked in long-term care, how would you know? But there's really opportunity to learn about the aging process and really what it's like to be a family caregiver. And my hope for you is that you've learned just through these last few slides about what it's like to be a family caregiver. And if you have clients who are in that role, it's critical for you to be a resource for them and say, look, this isn't in my scope of practice because I just manage your resources, but here's a resource for you, and she can help you develop a plan so that you don't get burned out, so that you don't have to use up all your vacation days to tend to your aging parents. So developing those relationships with your clients and their adult children is going to be essential. Traditional advisors are just transactional. You know, you manage their assets. You might talk to your client once or twice a year, tops. Those days, if you want to stay in business, those days are going to have to be gone. That business model will have to go away because now they have the robo-advisor, and a lot of people are moving over to a robo-advisor because it's less expensive. And if you're not adding value to your clients, then they might as well use an online robo-advisor. So it's really important to just show your clients that, yes, I can manage your money, but I also have this whole other resource of a network of people that can help you with your particular situation. So you have to show more value, otherwise you will possibly lose clients to other advisors who do show value, or to the competition of the robo-advisor. Clients and families are seeking additional resources from their advisor. Think about how many times you get phone calls from your clients that are saying, oh, I'm going through this now, or I just lost my job, or I lost my job and now I have to take care of my parents, and how am I supposed to interview for jobs if I'm taking care of my parents? And so oftentimes advisors are the go-to person for their, for their issues that they have, and they want you to be a resource for them. And if you don't already have a network of people you can refer your clients to, you really will want to develop one. So develop your team of trusted professionals that make you look good. Refer your clients to professionals who can meet their other needs, because some advisors will say, well, they're just paying me and hiring me to be their money manager. Well, that's fine, but if you keep with that kind of mindset, you may be losing out on other opportunities with clients, because consumers are getting smarter. They want to know what their money is going for and what kind of value is being provided to them. Your clients will help boost your business if you meet their holistic needs. They'll refer you to all their friends and families because they'll say, oh my gosh, Bill Smith really helped me out. Yeah, he manages my assets, but I went to him because I had this other issue, and he put me in touch with a realtor, or he put me in touch with Annalee with CareRight. Yeah, I know, a shameless plug, but that's going to build your business is off of word of mouth referrals too. And then when Ethel and Marvin die, again, their kids will move those assets to a different advisor, and one that they know. So it's important that you develop those relationships with those adult children. 2 weeks ago, I did get a referral from a financial advisor, and the client wanted him to sit in on the meeting with me, and I said yes, because I work as a team, because it is holistic. So the financial advisor sat in there, and that was the first time, and he's been managing this family's, the Ethel and the Marvin's assets for about 20 years now, and he's never met their children. So it was really beneficial for him to meet those kids, because now he's developing a relationship with them, so that when his senior clients pass away or start to get sick, they're going to lean on him as a potential resource for their family as well. And when I also say holistic, one of the things I've learned from working with advisors who say holistic, I'm not talking about holistic from like what other products you can upsell them, or helping make sure that they've got their living will and work with CPAs. I'm talking holistic from those aspects for sure, like long-term care planning and working with their CPA and working with their estate attorney or elder law attorney. But I'm talking about the holistic needs of the family and their parents. So developing that aging plan, that's holistic. It's much more comprehensive than just working with their attorney. Additional takeaways, because that holistic word continued to come up through the last 8 years of working with advisors, I finally asked an advisor last year, I said, you know, I hear this word holistic all of the time from advisors. Almost every advisor I've ever met with says we're holistic. So then I'm like, why aren't you referring clients then? And so what I've learned about holistic is that, like I said, that holistic meant to them if they can upsell them long-term care insurance or other products and plans. So holistic, when I say holistic, it's truly the word holistic of working as a comprehensive planner with a full team of professionals for your clients. And like I said earlier, learning what it's like to be a family caregiver who's in survival mode and really the hardships that they encounter physically and emotionally every day. A lot of these senior family caregivers, you know, the spouses of the caregivers, they're not having their hip surgery, they're not having their rotator cuff surgery because they're like, I can't. Because who's going to take care of my wife or who's going to take care of my husband? And so if those are your clients also, know that they're jeopardizing their own health because they're a family caregiver. So be proactive in identifying clients who need an aging plan. I don't know what your process is, but you may want to develop some processes and some checklists so that you are meeting the needs of your clients. Asking them, are you a family caregiver? Do you anticipate being a family caregiver? What are your major stressors and worries in your life? Is there anything impacting your financial goals? Is there anything impacting your physical and emotional health care goals? And learn about diminished capacity and memory impairment because, like I said earlier, families are starting to sue advisors. So it's in your best interest and your client's best interest to know about memory impairment and know what the red flags are. Learn about the roles and the tolls of what family caregivers are going through and how you can be a resource and an advocate for them. Client referrals are a must, and how to make a referral. And the reason this is in here is because the other thing I learned about advisors is that because most of them are transactional, they're not used to making referrals for their clients. And so when I'd circle back with these advisors that I've spent tons of time with and workshops and financial retreats and all that kind of stuff, I circle back and say, you know, I just want to make sure you understand what CareRight does and the value for your clients. Oh, well, I gave your business card or I gave them your phone number. So that tells me that they don't understand what it's like to be a caregiver and they don't understand the aging population. So if you're in survival mode and you're told, oh, well, here, reach out to this person, that's just one more task of their day that's already full of 200 other tasks. And I promise you they will not call. So if you really want to help your client, you need to say, you know what, daughter Sally, I have so-and-so in my network. Can I have her reach out to you directly? And I can almost guarantee you 100% of the time they will say yes, because that's one less thing they have to do. So avoid just giving out the client, just giving out the business card to a client. You have to make an actual referral. And our job is to make our clients' life easier. And to do that, we need to take the initiative and say, I've got this person in my network or this company in my network that this is what they do for a living and they can help you develop your aging plan. Can I have them reach out to you directly? And they'll say yes. And again, you are in a position to be a valuable resource to your clients and help your clients succeed in areas beyond just their assets under management. I wear two hats. So CareRight, I help families with their aging plan and facilitate their aging plan and put that plan into place. So I implement it and oversee it and help repair those strained relationships and make sure that they've got home care in there or technology or whatever it is that their needs are to help them be safe at home. And I also help them find the right fit community based on what they can afford and what demographic they want to live in and those kind of things. But I also wear another hat. I have a business partner and we started a company called Plan for Life. And we developed an elder care planning specialist designation. He's a retired financial planner of 30 years in Connecticut. I've had my experience with families and caregiving and the aging process, and my experience with the financial planning industry. And we kind of locked arms and said, look, there's a lot of things that these advisors need to know that they don't know. And so we started a company, Plan for Life. The website is Plan for Life now. We developed a curriculum for financial advisors who want to set themselves apart from the thousands of other advisors out there, so that you have much more information about what is memory impairment, how will that affect your business, why is it important to have these relationships with these adult children, why it's important to develop a team of trusted professionals to refer your clients to, and how you can remain in business with the constant changing in your industry with now the robo-advisor, and how your industry is changing and evolving. And if you want to stay in business, and work with elderly population, those are just some things that you need to know. We're continually building out our training modules for advisors, but those are the core areas that we work with when we have advisors that we're training who want to earn this special designation, especially if you're working with an aging population or the people that are in their 40s and up. If you're working with millennials, then obviously this isn't anything that would be needed for you right now. But if you're working with kind of that mid-age range group and older, this is something that you will want to consider. We're developing a 2-day program later this fall, and so you can just keep tabs on our website, but it's planforlifenow.com. If you're an advisor and you want to learn more about that, you can also call me because I carry the phone for Plan for Life as well. And if you have families and clients that you are stumped on what to do because they have aging parents, obviously I would hope that you would look to CareRight as a resource for those families as well. I wanted to ask if there are any questions.
All right. Annalee, thank you so much. I had first heard Annalee actually last year when we did a webinar with the Financial Planning Association, and I was sharing with her earlier today that I just remember making a mental note about how impressed I was with her depth of experience and how much she cares about people. It just comes through, and it's obviously a whole nother world that those of us that are on the other side of the brain, I guess it's the left side of the brain, that are more numbers oriented, that we just don't pick up the clues on what happens here in these kinds of situations. So thank you for, drawing that analogy between, an aging plan for your parents, like a financial plan, getting ahead of it, and also better understanding what caregivers are going through, because they're silent martyrs in many cases, and we just don't see it because they don't say anything. So time to take your questions, and in the meantime, Annalee, I'll get you started with a couple. I have, let's see, one person here asked about, this is a great question. How do you address siblings who chastise the caregiver daughter for using the parent's money, that they feel that's getting into their inheritance, and they want an accounting of how the money is spent?
What, you get that problem too?
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons I became a mediator, is because even with working with families for CareRight, my CareRight families, many adult children have their own ideas of how money should be spent and how that's going to affect their inheritance. And so that's why it's important to have these conversations, because sometimes what I have found through working with my families through CareRight and my mediation is that there's just a lot of misunderstanding, and it depends on what their lifetime relationship has been like as a family. But what I can share with you is that when I do mediations with clients, you can just feel the anger and the hostility with these siblings, but when they understand what the role is of being a family caregiver, some of these family caregivers, the adult children, not all of them, but some of them did actually develop like a healthcare contract with their parent that says, fine, I'll be your caregiver, but in lieu of that, I want this, or I want that, or I'm going to get paid, X amount of dollars per month. And if the family hasn't communicated all those things to each other, then you end up with a conflict on your hands. That's not always the case. Not all families have developed that kind of language in a contract that says, fine, I'll be at your beck and call, but this is kind of what the outlay is going to have to be like for me to quit my job and do that. But having these conversations, and I don't know if this is something that would really be in your scope of practice, because most of what you need to do is educate these adult children, and find out what kind of communication, why do they expect what they're expecting? Was there some sort of conversation that was held 20 years ago before mom ended up with dementia? So a lot of times you need a lot more information about where are they coming from, and are they able to move into a different direction once they know more of the information that probably wasn't shared to them in the first place.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But that said, real quickly, there are people out there that are just money hungry, and seniors are vulnerable. Seniors are very vulnerable, and so I don't know that you guys are mandatory reporters. I am as a social worker. I don't know that financial advisors are. But if there's any suspicion or allegation that those adult children are taking advantage of your clients, you'll want to address that. And I don't know what your corporate policies are and compliance is on that, but you'll want to address it, because you, again, don't want other family members to come back to you and say, well, financial advisor Tom knew that brother John was taking mom's money because I told him on this and this date. Because those are the families that document everything. So make sure you're documenting all of your conversations and your family meetings to protect yourself too.
And I mean, it goes the other way too, where you go back to one of your points earlier, is that the caregiver spends a lot of their own money, Mm-hmm. So maybe it's just starting with, an accounting every month. Here's what was spent on mom or dad's care. Here's what I put in of my own money. Here's what Susie put in of her own money, and just making sure everybody's aware of that. And granted, you have some family members that have more means that can help with things, and others that don't, so mm-hmm. That's though part of everybody pitching in and having some skin in the game and helping each other, so that one person doesn't carry the burden. So that's
right.
The whole thing. So yep. I remember hearing, I don't know if it was Rhode Island, one of the states, they talked about with Medicare, I think, allowing a adult child to be paid for caregiving in the home, so that mom or dad didn't have to be in a facility. Does that ring a bell to you? And
so there are a lot of programs like that, but just know that when they're saying pay, it's like in Wisconsin, they have that program too, and the pay is like $7 an hour. So if you can afford to leave your executive job to get paid $7 an hour, then yay for you, because you planned well. But when they say pay, they're not talking matching your salary. So so yeah, there are programs out there, and there's different places that you can check to see where, if there's a program like that in your county or in your state. But just know that the pay is like $7, $8 an hour. It's not anything that you can really live on.
Okay. You mentioned something about financial requirements of facilities, kind of scoping that out ahead of time. Can you explain and define facility, meaning assisted living or the short-term facilities? So talk more about that.
Yep. So a lot of the continuing care retirement communities, if you move in at the independent living level, there's what they call entrance fees or community fees, and that's a big chunk of money that you have to pay up front. And then you still have monthly room and board, and as you move through the continuum, as you need more care, then they have different, levels of care for you to move into, but you still have to pay room and board. And then as you need more care, then they have different levels of care. So they may range anywhere from $300 a month to $2,000 or $3,000 a month in just additional care costs. So when families think, oh, well, we can just, we'll just move mom into the facility down the street from us because it's close. Well, they may require an entrance fee depending on what level of care you're moving into. But a lot of facilities have, you have to fill out a financial application, and you have to prove that you have 2 or 3 years of private funds before you go on state assistance. Otherwise, you can't get in, because healthcare is a business and they have to be, positive cash flow. And as far as nursing homes, the trick is with nursing homes is that many facilities put a cap on their Title 19 beds. And the reality is that even in Milwaukee, there's Title 19 facilities, but they have years and years and years of waiting lists because there's so many people that are looking for a bed, looking for a nursing home, but they don't have money to get in. And so a lot of them die before they actually can get placed somewhere. I've got a client out in Massachusetts. She's got $50,000 to her name. She's 68 years old, and she doesn't have a lot of options, and she's going to need care sooner rather than later. And if you don't plan for these kind of things, then I'm trying to find her a facility, and even the elderly waiver out there has a 10-year waiting list, and they quit taking names. So you have to plan ahead, no matter if you have money or if you don't.
That was going to be my question to you, is what if you're out of money? So it really is important to get ahead of it. Yeah, and like you said earlier, the numbers are growing, so you've got more people, and Title 19 is Medicaid?
Right. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So there are not being facilities built to take care of the fact that we do have an increasing aging population. I mean, I don't exactly see a lot of nursing homes going up around us. So
they're not. The new construction is memory care, because there's more people with memory impairment that need a place to live because they can't live at home anymore. And so a lot of new construction is assisted living and memory care. But again, that's all private pay. So and families don't know what they don't know, so they move their loved one into a community, and then 2 years later they get a notice that says you have 30 days to move out because you're going to end up on Title 19, Medicaid, and we don't accept Medicaid. We're only private pay. And the families are like, what?
Yeah.
And so now they have no money, and their parents are 2 years older and more vulnerable and more dependent and in need of more care, and trying to find an oncoming community or facility to take them on is very difficult. So I end up with clients that are driving 2 and 3 hours one way because that's the closest facility they could find a Title 19 bed.
Wow. Oh my gosh, system's broken. Well, all right. Well, on that uplifting note,
yeah.
Thank you, Annalee. I'm so glad there's people like you out there and obviously, you've put together a training program, because there's just not this information out there for people, and it sounds like it's for advisors, but you may even want to create one that's for just the average person who has aging parents, so that they better understand what they're up against. So
I have those too.
Yeah,
I have those webinars too.
Yeah. So thank you again so much, Annalee. Just great stuff. And everyone, thank you again for being here today. I want to remind you to complete the evaluation after the webinar is over. And here's our next upcoming sessions. April 3rd, rebroadcast, where senior living, going back to kind of the what Annalee's talking about, for those that have more funds, where senior living and retirement planning intersect, opportunities emerge. And this is talking about continuing care communities and the costs, and assisted living, just better understanding that whole part of our business, of our industry. And then on April 19th, the Platinum Retirement Challenge, Great Divorce with Lily Vasiliff. And she's we'll be talking again about how divorce can affect retirement as well. So thank you everyone for being here with us again, and for this session of the monthly Retirement Professional Development Webinar Series. Annalee, myself, and the team here at the Retirement Resource Center, we thank you for participating. Have a wonderful rest of the day, and we look forward to being with you again in the near future. Take care.